Welcome to the What Now podcast, where we document our journey through chiropractic. Our goal is to give you, the new chiropractor, our firsthand experience in running a principled, cash-based practice right out of school. Join us as we bring you real perspective, lessons learned, and the leading names in the profession as we build the practices of our dreams. Yo, everybody. What is up? Welcome back to another episode of the What Now podcast. Spencer and Zach back in action for you guys. We have some awesome guests today. Zach, tell everybody who we have on deck for them today.
Yeah, so super excited and blessed to be joined by Dr. Colton and Dr. Lacey Nevel from Free Spirit Chiropractic in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Little background on Colton and Lacey. They went to Parker University. Lacey graduated in 2017, Colton in 2018. They practice out of Free Spirit Chiropractic in Tulsa, Oklahoma for the last 5.5 years. They opened in May 2018, and it is their own practice. They met before Chiro school in 2013 at a concert. Curious to see what kind of concert it was. Realized they were both interested in chiropractic, and the rest is history. They've been married for 5.5 years. They've been together for almost 11. They have one kiddo, Luca, who is 2.5 years old, and they're both 32. They specialize in nervous system family wellness, both prenatal and peds as well. And they're just super excited to chat all things preparing to open or to associate. They run a 7-figure all cash office, although they do it in a city where there's like 0 chiropractors, Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so, you know, they have that advantage there. They're laughing because they know, as I'm sure most of you might know, that Tulsa has the most chiropractors per square foot or something like that. So welcome to the What Now podcast. Super excited to have you along.
Yeah, we're excited to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Of course.
Cool, guys. So I would love for us to kind of set the scene for our listeners today. If you guys could describe kind of what was your journey transitioning from school, and like when did you graduate, and how did you guys navigate that gap from, hey, I'm just graduating to I'm going to start a practice? What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, so Colton and I were actually the anomaly back in the day during Parker, because we got started with a coaching program when I was in Tri 6 and you were in Tri 3. And so we just started, and at that time, that coaching program was over $1,000 a month. We were like, okay, if we're gonna open up our own practice, we're gonna hit the ground running and do every seminar, every business coaching, every weekend. We always joked because we spent so much money on different seminars and traveling to just learn chiropractic, like actual chiropractic. And so there was no doubt in our mind that we would succeed because of all the back work that we put in. Fast forward, I graduated August of 2017, and then Colton graduated in April 2018. During that time that I graduated, obviously Colton was back in Dallas, and then I had moved up to Tulsa, and I was on the hunt to find the perfect space. Which, if any of you guys have heard me speak in the previous on stages, I talk about the journey. It is a wild one. We actually purchased a house. We walked in and we were looking at it to buy for like our personal house, which is so funny looking back, because I'm like, we did not have like actual income to buy that for our actual house. And we walked in like where the kitchen and the living room were, and we were like, this would be the perfect chiropractic office. And we had just came across this realtor through a family friend, and she was like, oh yeah, like listening to the vision, but she had no idea how to get us there. And so we actually reached out to another realtor friend that she specialized in commercial property. And she was like, I mean, this is a really big risk. Sometimes it takes 60 to 90 days, and sometimes you'll get through the whole process and the city will be like, no, you can't transition this into a commercial property. It took about, I always joke, it was like a full-term baby, literally 9 months to the day to get it zoned. It was a hot mess. Colton was driving every Sunday morning?
Yeah, when this was after we got it zoned.
Yeah.
We started building it out. It took us probably 2 months solid to build out, but in that whole process, the whole 9 months, so 11, almost a year, I was still in school, and I was in my last trimester internship for that last 3-4 months. And then before that in clinic, I didn't go to clinic on Fridays. And then luckily my internship, the office wasn't open on Friday. So 8 o'clock on Thursdays, I leave Dallas, drive 5 hours to Tulsa, work on the office all weekend long. And then Sunday at 2:30 a.m., I drive back to Dallas to be at my internship by the time we would open. So for like 9 months, 7 to 9 months, I was pretty tired, but it's just a big push, right?
Yeah. And I think too, like that zoning process, because we thought it was going to be fairly easy. We were like, oh, it's right on a really busy street. You know, it's not like inward facing to a neighborhood. It is in a neighborhood, but it actually faces the street. It was one of the rare ones. And so it was definitely a challenge mindset wise, because it was like every single thing that we thought would be really easy was not. Towards the end, I was up at City Hall probably every other day, meeting with different people, like really sharing our story. We had a lot of issues with the neighborhood not wanting us to be there. And so they're just like, it was at the time, a really old historic like type neighborhood. So they were thinking like, oh my gosh, this is going to like bring in all these homeless, bring all these issues, blah, blah, blah. And that was actually right around the time that a funny story is medical marijuana got passed in Oklahoma. So they kept clinging to that. Like, well, what if you sell it to the medical marijuana? And we were like, no, we're not, like, that's not what we're about.
Not our jam.
So, yeah. And we literally had to make like vision boards after vision boards to show them like, this is what ideally the inside's going to look at. So I think that was really important in like molding who we were, because once it did get zoned, which I'll plug in, I had to literally convince how many people. It was like over 150 neighbors at a neighborhood meeting, that this was like, hey, this was good for the city.
Yeah, they came out in full force, walkers, wheelchairs, and all.
Literally
average riders
with their tickets ready to rally. Yeah,
exactly. So and they were not like open at all. And by the end, obviously they were, when I shared like the vision and the purpose behind what we wanted to bring. But that too like lit us on fire. Colton graduated mid-April and we opened the first weekend of May.
Yep.
And he didn't even have his licensing complete by the time that we opened, because it was like so quick.
Yeah.
But that really set us on fire. Like, okay, we have to do this. Like, we have to hit the ground running. Like, there's no turning back. There's no failing. And so even though that journey sucked at the time, it was really great for both of us.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much there. And thank you for sharing that. I think that lends a lot of insight. I think we can always look at these practices that are successful, like y'all's, and see, well, they probably didn't have to go through the zoning and, going to HOA meetings and having the neighborhood wanting to shut them down. But just one quick funny thing, back in November of 22, I was up in Tulsa for a seminar and just driving around, and I was like kind of in this y'all's neighborhood, and drove right by, and I was like, oh, it's a nice looking house. And then I see the Free Spirit sign, and I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like their branding and it's like the nicest house in the area. So I'm sure now the neighbors are very okay with y'all being. Yeah,
they love
take
it
care
now.
of a lot of them now.
They love it now, minus our parking.
Yeah, right.
Gets a little busy.
Yeah, so
go ahead, Cole.
Well, I was going to say, I think going through that process, it really hit the nail on the head that owning any kind of business, even outside of chiropractic, and starting it and getting it off the ground and getting it to be more successful is not easy. Like, I know a lot of people will come in and be like, as long as you got the plan and the script for what you need to do, it's not hard to be an entrepreneur, being a business owner. And we know like 7-8% of people are actually people that could open a business, and then 1% of those will be successful, right? So really, really small percent. And I think going through hard things just make you more equipped on the back end to be successful in the future when everything's not going your way either. I know, Zach, you did 29/29 not too long ago, right?
I did back in August. Yep.
Yeah. Not an easy task, is it?
No, it was not easy. It was, I will say, y'all are married, but for anyone listening, it's great premarital counseling for sure. I did it with my fiance at the time. So to encourage her up the mountain was a lot of fun.
But it's cool to put yourself in hard stuff like that on purpose, right? And I don't think people do that enough. No,
I mean, we could definitely dive into that rabbit hole of, you guys had your moment where, I mean, for those 9 months, I'm sure it was so agonizing, probably a lot of sleep lost. You were like, is it even worth it? one of my favorite quotes from The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho is, as you're, on track, I'm going to butcher the quote, so it's not the direct quote, but as you're on track, for what you feel like God or the universe has on your path or on your heart, the universe is going to conspire against you and make sure that you work as hard as you can and really test you if you want it, and you guys wanted it, and now you have this beautiful flourishing family practice. So that was really cool to hear. Really cool to hear.
That's exactly kind of what I wanted to touch on, is because, you talk about this, it was like a whole year up into your opening, right? So like so many of us think that, I mean, and I say so many of us, speaking like you graduate, you say like, yeah, I'm gonna sign a lease on this place, you put a table in there and boom, you have a business, right? But it takes so much legwork to get things off of the ground. And we have a lot of friends who just graduated that are opening their practices, building their practices. And a lot of our listeners is kind of what they're doing, right? So after the first year, you haven't brought in a single penny of income yet at this point. And so now it's like, whoa, now I get to actually do the thing. All of this dreaming, all of this anticipation, all of this work that you bring forward, now is go time, right? Prep time, prep time, prep time. So what was your mindset like on day one when you unlock the door and you're like, wow, all right, now we have an open schedule for care versus like, I'm just here to do the moldings and stuff like that. What was your mindset like at now that you're open?
Excited,
Yeah.
ready to rock. Because not only were we doing the work to open the physical space, right? We were in the community a lot. So when I would come back, we weren't always just working on getting the office ready, because we did a lot of that build out ourselves. Obviously, we didn't have very much money. So we were having to do the physical labor, but then we were also, both of us got plugged into the Tulsa community while we were still living in Dallas, like years before. Our social medias were already up. People knew we were coming. So when we opened the door day one, we had people on the books.
Yeah.
Our first month in practice, we collected over 20,000 cash. So we jumped off the table there.
Yeah.
And we knew that going in.
And that's something like a lot of people don't see the back end, like, yeah, all the sleepless nights, everything. But whenever I was here during the week and meeting with all City Hall, I actually got plugged in because at the time, two of the board members were small business owners. And so they plugged me into the small business community. So I was part of the chamber. I was like learning and meeting all these people. And I actually got linked in with one of the big hospitals here, St. Francis, in their trauma department. That weirdly, they had 9 nurses that were all pregnant at the same time. And so I literally had a table at our house in the living room. It was the only thing in the living room. And I saw them 3 times a week in my living room. And those are some of our like lifelong people. They always like tell people about us, everything. And so that really bridged the gap too with the medical community, because now we take care of, gosh, I would say probably 15% of our practice are healthcare workers in the hospital that think like us. They just get paid by the hospital. So it was really cool. I mean, it was a lot of like, I mean, literally every single day I was still serving. I was driving all over the state as well to serve people in the community, pregnant, kids, families. One of our longest term families, we were actually joking about that. What was it, last week? We were seeing how many visits they had been with us, and it was over 550. And that's pretty cool. I saw them literally, their whole family of, at the time it was 4, now there's 7. In there. Yeah. And I did the scans, we did everything. We just took it all. And I was like, all right, we're mobile at this point, building. Right?
That's super inspiring. And I hope for everyone who's listening is like, oh wow, I don't just need to sit around and get my one Instagram post up as I'm working on the build out and those type of things. Like you actually gotta be active and you gotta be in the community. That's something I know Spencer and I are big on, being plugged into your local chamber and those type of things. I have 2 questions, but I think the first one is when or both does that drive come from that you guys have to go all out and really serve your community, where you're driving all around Oklahoma? Colton, you're driving home at 2:30 in the morning. Like a lot of people enjoy chiropractic, but they're not willing to do that. Where did that come from for y'all?
I think a lot of it was like during school, like I said, we put in a lot of the legwork then, and we knew like we did quarterly, we would turn back quarterly to our vision, our purpose, and know that when we were starting, if things got hard, we'd fall back on the purpose of why we were doing it, right? Like this, yeah, it sucks in the moment, but think of all the people in our community that we're going to help in the future, and how eventually that can lead our vision of changing absolute healthcare in our community in the future later on, right? And know that when that vision starts to get a little bit closer and a little bit closer, because you are being more successful and you're getting closer to it, then as you go back to it and you start to revise it again, guess what? You never actually reach that vision, right? So if you're a startup chiropractor, know in the beginning that vision always grows. As you chase it, it's always getting better. And it should, because it should be so big that it pulls you forward through the hard stuff, right? So whenever I have to get up at 2:30 in the morning and drive 4.5, 5 hours back to Dallas, that's okay, because the whole 5 hours I'm sitting there thinking about what we're doing and what impact it's going to make later on, right? And then when it gets hard again, I go back to the foundation of what's pushing me toward that vision, which is our purpose to help and serve people in our community. That always pushed us through going forward.
Yeah. And I want to say too, like we talk about that all the time. Our mindset coming out of school was so different because we were constantly immersed in communities like you guys know, KTC, MLS, literally anything that we could grasp onto, we were in. We were in different chiropractic offices. We were building that vision so much from the beginning and along the way that when we came out, it was like, I mean, we were the kids. We were just talking about this weekend at one of our trainings that we were in. I don't know if it's still there, but the Parker Museum, Jim Parker Museum at Parker. So yeah, we were,
makes me
it's
so
crazy
off.
because we
Sad.
were
Got taken out by the tornado.
Okay. So, and I figured they probably didn't rebuild anything, but we were in there doing philosophy nights once a week. I mean, we were in different offices, like literally doing philosophy nights and talking about like our vision and vision casting and meditation and all of those things that you seem are so like woo woo. But that, I mean, we came out and it was like the drive to impact thousands, millions was just so strong.
Yeah.
So I do.
I'm of the belief that it's only woo-woo if you don't take action on it. And it very much seems like y'all took action on it. And I think maybe for the student listening, that's, you know, well, what are my friends back home going to think of me if I go all in, or like maybe they're kind of wishy-washy. What would you say to them or encourage them, or even that current chiropractor that's still trying to live almost two different lives?
Just do it, really.
Yeah.
Just take the risk and know that it's going to be hard, but getting submerged in community is the biggest thing. You know, like reaching out to people and not being afraid to ask questions. That was something that we did from the very beginning. And like we were talking about pre-show, is there was not a lot of information given to us. I mean, we had paid for coaching. We were in all of these offices. We were asking, okay, like what is achievable in the first 90 days of practice or in that first year? Like what is expected or what is like the normal, right? And nobody could give us or would want to give us their answers, anything like that. And so it was one of those things that we kind of had to figure out along the way. Actually, one of our mentors who is not in chiropractic, he is a, what do you call him? Like an extremely smart business person. He created an AI, if that gives you a little bit of an insight. But he was like, based off of teaching hundreds of chiropractors for the last 10 years, I would say 90 patients in 90 days is like what a big high bar that you should hit. And Colton and I were like, okay, cool.
180.
We'll double it. Yeah. And so when we did and we reported it back at the 90 days, he was like, holy shit. And so he asked us a lot of questions, like, how did you get here? Like, what made you? And it was like that drive and that community and just like never giving up, but also like always steering forward. You have to imagine like the impact that you're going to make in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 100 years. Like, what does that look like? And I think that is something that gets lost a lot of times in chiropractic, especially in the beginning. But it's like, once you start hitting those, you become more hungry, right? It's like, just like anything with working out, you become more hungry whenever you do something. And it's like, I want to keep going and I want to keep driving to impact whatever it is. Yeah.
And I'd say if you're worried about the people around you and what they think, you need to cut that mindset out of your mind right now. And it's easy to do whenever you, just like we were talking about a second ago, if you go back to purpose and vision, like if I'm helping people, why would anybody be against that? Right. And if you're giving and you're spilling out the truth, then that's all that matters. If you're standing whole, like if you're hold strong in truth, then what are you worried about what anybody thinks about that? Right. And the truth, at the end of the day, the truth will do every single time. So if you start shouting that super loud, then, and you're super convicted around that, then people are going to actually gravitate towards you because conviction is really, really catchy.
Yeah, I think that's like a big thing that we see. And so, like, I mean, if our listeners don't know, like, you guys just started like a startup lab thing, like for people who are looking to start their practice. And I know, like, for Zach and I, way back, like in our first episode, we were like, man, we just have to start. Like, we don't know where we're going. And the vision will kind of build itself as we start to walk down this path, right? So, like, what are some advice that you guys have for people who are trying to embark on this journey, but are like, I don't know where to go. I don't know what my vision necessarily is. Like, I know I want to practice and I know I want to be successful, but how do you like stoke that fire of conviction inside of people, like when you coach them? And really, like, I guess people who come into your practice as well, but like, how do you actually fire these people up to understand what their truth is and how to build that conviction in them?
Yeah, I would say first, you have to find a community. And you said that during the question, right?
Yeah.
You can do it alone, but it's going to be way harder. There is a shortcut, and that's get around people that have already done it.
Yep.
And that's a big thing that we help with in the startup lab whenever we're coaching startups, is because we are kind of steps ahead, right? And it wasn't long ago. Like, we're not 30 years into practice where back in the day, social media didn't even exist, right? Like, we know, like, we're still growing our practice too, just at a different level. So we know exactly where you are. Just 5 years ago, we were there. So it's really relevant. We can help people get through those things. And then with the startup lab, obviously there's a cost there as well. But then I will say, I will plug in, we did start a Facebook group like last year, I think, and it's Chiropractic Startup Success. So it's an open group and anyone can get in there and it's free. And we're going to start digging into that really hard this year and just putting a bunch of free content in there that is really tactical tools if you are a startup that's going to help you. And then it's a free community that I think if we had thousands of chiropractors in there, that'd be a huge bonus to anyone starting a chiropractic office. You can go in there and just get free advice from people that are doing it in the now.
And piggybacking off of that too, with the community, that transitions into your practice naturally. Whenever you're surrounded by a community within chiropractic profession, you're going to want to bring that into your own space. We talk about it all the time with our team. We have 3 CAs, and that is something that I will say sets our office completely apart, is our community and our culture. I mean, as soon as a mom walks in with her babies, one of the girls are grabbing for that baby. They're like, you sit on the couch, you rest, especially if it's a newborn. Or like when we're getting done adjusting, they're like grabbing the baby, peeling oranges. Like, they are literally creating a 5-star service. But also, so parents and individuals alike can create that community. We always, we're in the process of onboarding not only 1 chiropractor, but 2 chiropractors. So that's really exciting. But that was something last week, whenever they came and shadowed, they were like, it literally feels like a family reunion in here. And it's like all of these people that don't know each other just like sit on the couch and start like drinking kombucha. They're talking about, I mean, all kinds of. Wednesday was wild. We call it Wild Wednesdays. All the conspiracies were coming out, and we were all like, LOL, but talking about all the fog and things like that. But it was just really cool to see like 2 people coming in that they actually own a practice. And they were in their first year, and they quickly realized, hey, and they were in our startup group, and that's how they actually reached out to us. And they said, we loved owning a practice, but we realized it's not for us right now. And so we were like eager to continue the process of in the startup, but we just didn't want to be the business owner. And I think that's so important, especially too, if you're a student or you're a startup, like, and I will say school now, it's like a lot more people are coming out and wanting to start up their own practice, but that's not the only way either. There are plenty of startups. And I know you guys had talked about in a previous episode about maybe in a year, you would onboard another chiropractor. And that's important. Like, you want people that are on fire. They're not just looking to show up and adjust people and they want to be part of a community. They want to be part of an actual company, a brand that is making that impact. So I think that's important too, to really focus on.
And I would say also, maybe starting right out of school isn't for everyone. Yeah, we run a startup, like, quote unquote, coaching group, but if you're not super dialed in on that, like, exactly how you're going to get there, maybe an associateship for a year or 2 is a good thing, right? And if your true vision of what you're going to do and impact the world with through chiropractic is to own an office and run it and develop it and grow it and scale it and all those things, know that if you look at that journey as like a movie script, the end should always be the same, right? The ending, the climax, everything should be the same, but you can rewrite the script along the way. The script doesn't have to be the exact same all the way through. That can change, right? And no, it might change. Might be, hey, I started practice and I'm like, damn, this shit ain't for me right now. And then you do go associate for like 3 years and you're like, that's okay, because the end of the movie is still going to be the same at the end of this.
Yeah.
Right. And something I've started to tell students when they ask is like, I think if there's, not in a negative way, but if there's any, thought of should I associate or should I open, I always veer towards go associate, figure out what you want to do. Because if there's not that willingness to burn the boats and go for it, then you're always going to be thinking, 6 months in when it might get difficult, or during that build out process, you might be like, dang, I could have associated. And then that doubt starts creeping into your mind, and that mindset really starts to deter. But one thing I definitely want to dive into, and Spencer and I both want to hear more of. You mentioned that 5-star experience, peeling the oranges, having the kombucha. We talked right before we started that y'all's PVA, so patient visit average, how many times the average person walks into your office after the first exam is over 120, which the national average is 5 or 6 for those listening at home. So I'm not very good at math, but that's more than 20, 25, again, not
a lot more.
A lot more than the national average. So how did you go about building out that client or patient experience and really fostering that to what it is today?
Yeah, it's a really, we always joke because I actually worked in the restaurant industry all through undergrad, from serving tables, bartending, and I actually worked for a really great company out of Oklahoma that was, they were sticklers on patient experience or client experience. Everything was like to a T, and it was not like a fancy restaurant that I worked at. Fast forward, we actually hired our office manager. She was a trainer for that big company as well, that restaurant company, which I had met her. She was one of those people that I saw before we even opened, and I was adjusting her. So it's just like, it's funny how that, like, Colton and I are complete foodies, and we always talk about like the 5-star experience or like the Michelin star. And if you guys aren't familiar with Michelin star, there's a rating system. And so these are usually like, everything is perfect in the restaurant. A 3-star Michelin is like,
it's one of the highest honors you can get in a restaurant.
And it's something that this year, that's our big like message for our team is like, let's become the 3 Michelin star. And that's like, it is a constant training. We actually just had one of our patients come in. She's been with us for a little bit, but she moved here from Denver, and she owns a like neurofeedback clinic, like all over. She has one in Dallas and Denver, and then she's opening up one in Tulsa. And she was like, how did you train your team to be like so on it? Like every time I walk in, they're like, hey, and they say their name, and they're like, how are you today? How is this? Like, they remember things that happened 2 months ago. And I was like, it's a constant team training, but it's like checking in, and also like realizing for us as leaders in the community of like, hey, what do we want to be known as? Because like you said at the beginning, Tulsa is literally so many different chiropractors. Like, how are you going to stand out? And I think that is important, especially in the startup, because everybody wants to open up in these big cities or small cities, but it's like, how are you going to stand out amongst your community? And it's like being authentically you. That's all it comes down to, is like, what would you want to experience in your own space if you were a practice member coming into your doors? What are some of those touch points? And that's something too, like, we've evolved so much in the 5.5 years that we've been open. And it's a constant thing of like checking in with our practice members and saying like, what do you love about our office? What is something that you want to change about our office? Usually the only thing is like parking. They're like, I wish there was more parking, or they're like more biohacking. And I'm like, yeah, biohacking is like such a big vibe right now. But it is like, it's that constant check-in and learning and pivoting and being like, okay, I want to bring this in now.
Yeah. I will say, like, going back to even when we started, if you're ground zero, that is the best time to figure out what your experience in your office should be. Right. And that's what, like, we take all of our startups in the group through too. The day one, the board is completely blank. And then I want people to dream about it. And it doesn't have to look like anyone's office. Like, forget whatever chiropractic offices you've ever walked into, look like, sound like, feel like. What should it be? Put yourself in your future patient's shoes if you're a startup now or a student listening to this, and go, whenever I walk through the door, what am I going to experience? What am I going to feel? How am I going to be cared for? Even on the first phone call, through going through a website, like you need to think every single step of the way, from someone contacting you or finding you in the community to laying face down and then being there for a lifetime and their family's lifetime. What does that look like? And what kind of emotions and care is that person going to feel as they come through your office? And I think that's a big thing that we did in the very beginning. And that's a massive piece of why our PVA is where it's at today.
Mm-hmm.
And with
That's something we hit. Go ahead.
No,
I was just one thing that we hit when in our 5-year mark is we asked our people that have been with us in the first 3 months that we opened. And we personally asked them, like, we loved having you part of the practice. What is one thing that like really kept you here? Because our retention rate is high, and like even our transition rate into wellness is above 98%, which is also unheard of. Most people literally stay with us for at least 2 years. And that is like, that should be everybody's goal. We just actually got adjusted this weekend by a chiropractor who had been in practice for 44 years. His longest practice member, she started in 1963. So it was like 2 generations that he took over this practice, and then she continued. And I'm like, that if that doesn't light you on fire, like what? That is amazing. That should be the goal, right? Yeah. And so it's just really cool to see like the responses that you get when you start engaging with your community, especially those long-term practice members or those lifers, like we like to call them, and seeing. And it always comes back into the care and the service that your entire team, it's not just the chiropractors, it's the entire team gives every single time that I'm in this space. And that's really cool to see.
Yeah, that's a big lesson that I just learned. I just did my first focus group after finishing like my first complete year round. And we took like our top 12 families and we pulled them as a focus group. Like, what do you like? And nobody really said like, you have the fastest hands in the whole, like nobody cares about that. But in chiropractic school, like all we want to do is post videos about like how fast my cervical adjustment is, or I can adjust you with my earlobe, or all those kind of like stupid chiropractic things that we all care about. Everybody just says, when I come in here, it feels like I'm with my family. It feels like home in here. And really, that's kind of how my office is kind of designed. When I was talking to my interior designer, because like I don't have an eye for design and I recognize that, I talked to her and I said, hey, like I want people to be like, oh, this looks just like my house does, but there's a table and there's an adjusting table there, right? And I've seen pictures of your office and it's kind of the same, right? Because when you have an environment that people want to be into, then you're always there, right? Like I was just talking to a guy today and he's talking about his office flow and his layout and all those things. And I say, you want people to stay around, you want people to refer their friends, but they sit staring at the girl's ponytail in front of her waiting to get adjusted before. But you say like, oh, I want to have a community-based thing. When you spend an hour and a half at dinner with somebody, you're like, oh, that's no problem. But when you spend an hour and a half waiting to get your oil changed, you think it's forever and a half, right? And you get so mad. And so we have to put ourselves in the seat of our people, right? And to do those things. And so what are some of like the big highlights that you guys really focus on in your office to create that experience? Like what's something tangible that like, you're like, this is our favorite part about our office that people also love?
I'd say a big piece is just exactly what you just said. So our office is set up like we are out of a house. So it's set up kind of like a house, right? So we intentionally put people seated together, facing each other, not in lines like they're getting like their cattle going through our office. It doesn't feel like that ever. And then, like I said, we've worked through that whole patient experience list, and then our team has worked through it with us. So they know if they see someone sitting by themselves and they don't look like they're having a great day, go make a connection with that person, cheer them up, right? And then as you develop that culture over time, your own patients will start to do that, which is really, really cool. And especially in a world like we have right now, just coming through the last couple of years, people are more disconnected and lonely and alone than they ever have been. And they are seeking community and they're seeking a group to be part of. And if you can start to establish that in your office, then that's just going to put you way ahead of the curve going forward.
And that's something too with our girls, like ever since we first opened, it literally from the first day that someone calls the office, they say, I'm always going to butcher it, but they always say like, it's a great day at Free Spirit Chiropractic. This is Lauren. How can I help you? Or I can help you. And it's like, people love that. They're like, oh, Lauren. Like they don't even know it, Lauren, you know? And it's just like, that is that day one. But then as soon as they come in, like we already know that new patient's name. We've literally done all of the research on that new patient, which sounds super crazy, but in the Michelin star guide, like that is what you do. You research the hell out of the people coming into your restaurant. And so as soon as they walk in, they're like, oh, good morning, Susie. How are you today? Let me help you with anything, blah, blah, blah. Like that connection point. And then of course, like Colton was saying, getting in the community seating, we have like 3 living spaces that we have people at. I mean, the girls are constantly like, if there's one person in there, I mean, we may be ready for them, but we always let the girls have that touch point of like, how's the day today? Like, you know, blah, 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 like talking about it. And then like, okay, Dr. Lacey's ready for you to serve you today. And so it's like those little pieces of communication are so important when you're creating that community culture as well.
Yeah, and I'd say just the way our office is set up, like if you are wanting a family-based practice and a community-based practice, you're probably going to take care of some kids. So easy thing, have a place for those kids to go. Like we have a full room right when you walk through the door, that's a playroom for the kids. And people love that because like she was saying earlier, a mom that has 4 kids, half the time is pulling her hair out, right, with those 4 kids. So if she can throw those kids in the playroom and RCA takes over for a little bit to let her sit down and just chill and have a kombucha and relax for a second, that's huge for them, right? And then going back to that patient flow, if you can look at different places where like you do things all the time, like a first phone call or whenever they first enter the office, if you know their name as they walk in, look for things like that that are wow factors. Right? If it's just a simple first phone call, how can you 10x that first phone call to make the experience for that person where it makes it feel like they're being heard and they're cared for just off the phone, right? So that's a huge thing that we do with our teams. Like, where can we wow people even more and even more? Where can we care for them and let them know that we care for them over and over and over again and just compound that feeling? And whenever people feel like they're being heard and they're really, really cared for, they stick around because they want that community and they want that group of people that are going to feed into them so that they can feed into their families and their community around them, right?
Well, and something we always joke about, and as a team too, is like, you know, you're in the right place when a parent is like, hey, I'm going to drop off my 3 kids in the playroom while I run down the street to grab my other 2 kids from pickup, right? Or like the mom that comes in and she's a new mom and maybe she's freaking exhausted and she's like, I just need 15 minutes. The girls are like, hey, we have a private couch back there. Why don't you just sit back? I'll get you some coffee, kombucha, whatever it is, some tea, and let us hold the baby. Let us be just give you a moment. Like that is so many times that happens. And we always joke, but it's like, that is the magic right there in creating that community.
That's really cool. And one thing before we dive into it, I love hearing that it's not adding another modality. It's not, you know, adding all these different things. It's really being people to other people. And Colton, you hit it on the head. I mean, coming out of the pandemic, that was, you know, one of the biggest things we needed to do, especially as health practitioners. I would be curious, we don't have to go too deep on it, but y'all hinted at like that initial phone call. So what would it look like if I were to go on to freespiritchiro.com, submit a form to become a new patient? Take me through all, if you can, all the way up until that transition report, and maybe some of the secret sauce that y'all add in there. If you know it, unless your team is
like we can hit the big like key points throughout that. So we have a designated person in our office that is our new patient coordinator. So she's the person that takes them from first phone call through to where pretty much all the way until they're getting their exam, right? So at least that transition there. So she does a lot of the back end research on them too. So she will look them up on social media. Like we want to know if it's Susie is a mom coming in with headaches or whatever it is on her paperwork, then we know, oh, Susie also has 3 kids, right? And if Susie needs to bring those kids with her to the appointment, we have a designated area where those kids can be, because that's usually a big question for a mom, right? Like, oh, do I need to get a sitter for my kids so I can go to this appointment and those things? What big things that we're trying to accomplish, even just through first phone call, is we're trying to get rid of the questions that they probably already have that give them anxiety of doing something that they've never done, right? So she's thinking of those things that might be going through Susie's head. And then on that first phone call, a lot of times she's answering those questions for her before she even asks them, right? So the biggest thing with getting someone to come in and feel comfortable is just getting those obstacles out of the way before they ever walk in the door. And then know whenever they're there, like, you know who they are and kind of what their struggles are going in. So you can walk them through that. You can just walk them right through that transition straight into the exam and then into signing the care plan, being face down as well.
Yeah. Some little touch points that we do, especially on that new patient phone call, is as soon as like they give the name, Lauren is asking, okay, is this visit for you, a family member, or your entire family? That always intrigues them to be like, oh, well, my husband or my kid actually deals with this. And then Lauren's connecting. That's the biggest thing. Like whenever you have a new patient coordinator, or if you're doing that as the doc, like connect with the person. You don't need to go through a flow list of all these million questions or the FAQs of the office. It's literally connecting. And then at the end, you could shorten it up. Like, these are common questions that we get, or just send an email and say, hey, we're so excited to serve you in our space. These are common questions. If you have anything, let us know. Like, there's sometimes when Lauren, because she is such a connector, she will be like on the phone for 30 minutes and we're like, what are you talking about? And she's like, well, now she's telling me about her best friend and her mom and all of this. And I'm like, okay, did we like get the appointments? And she's like, yeah, they're all scheduled. They're all coming in together. And we're like, lovely, perfect. You know, and that's something too unique about our office is when one person calls, it is rare, unless they are a single individual, that we are not getting at least 2, 3, 4. We just had 9 family members start care right before the holidays. And so that's a big thing too. It's like, again, like having that person, because that's their first impression. They're either super scared, they've never been to a chiropractor, or in our case, they've been to 18 million chiropractors in the radius of 1 mile. And they're like, hey, they're all doing the same thing. Like, I just want something different. Or I've had a friend that, you know, told me that you guys are different, even though we only offer a 1.5 minute, if that, adjustment. It's like that culture and what we bring in that intention throughout every single person that is in Free Spirit gives each time.
Yeah.
It's the same.
And I would say, like, even you touched on it, like whenever she answers the phone, she said, is this appointment for you, your child, or your whole family? Because we do see a lot of whole families too. But if that person doesn't, if they've never had experience with chiropractic, they may not know and probably don't know that we can take care of kids, right? So that's just planting seeds along the way. And that's a lot of what she's doing on a first phone call. And even when they get into the office, we do, I know it's like super simple and some people think it would be outdated or whatever, but we do an office tour. Like, you come in, she greets you by name, takes your hand, and she'll walk you through the office, not to show you where the freaking bathroom is. It's not a huge space. You can find the bathroom itself, but it's to take you by that playroom. So, you know, and you see, like, we don't, that's something that we intentionally do as well, that I think is different than a lot of offices. We don't have a specific time frame where we only see new patients and do reports. I specifically schedule our new patients at like 3:30 and 5 o'clock when our office is popping. That way, when they walk in, it's not dead. And they're like, okay, well, just like going to a restaurant, nobody's in the parking lot. Right? Yep. Yeah. They come in and they get hit in the side of the head with a teddy bear because it's a madhouse a lot of time, but not, I'm just kidding. But whenever they walk in, they see a lot of families and happy families and really healthy families, right? Like, this is a busy place. These people take care of a lot of people in our community. They must be pretty good. Right? And she walks them through that stuff. She hits our testimonial wall. And since she's done her research, if Susie's coming in with 3 kids, and she's got really bad headaches, maybe she touches on the headache one, right? And she's connecting them to, like, you're not the only person that's experienced this. We have a lot of people in our office that have dealt with the same things and felt the same way you feel. But now what they are experiencing now is so much greater than where they started, right? So they're already being plugged into our community and know that they're not alone anymore. And there's other people that have dealt with these exact same things. And she's doing that all along that easy new patient tour. That's not, like I said, to show them where the freaking bathroom is. It's to get them to understand this might be a lot more than what you originally thought when you walked in here.
Yeah. And even it goes into scheduling. Like, we talk about that in the afternoon because we're open till 6, Monday through Thursday. That 5 to 6 is usually our after work people who they either have one kid that comes with them, or they meet their spouse or their boyfriend or whoever it is literally at the appointment to get adjusted. And so we make that more like fun, upbeat. Or if we have someone that doesn't have any kids, we're like, hey, 3:30 to 4:30 is probably not the best time for you to come.
Yep.
There's 7 families of 9 in here at one time. It is a little bit chaotic. So, you know, and like Fridays, we used to do hip hop Fridays all the time because it was mostly like individuals, people going out of town, things like that, where we made it like really fun and match the energy of like the schedule. So that's something fun that you can even do in your own practice. If you have a certain time frame where you're like, oh, this is popping school, like everybody needs to be all hands on deck. Or if it's more chill at that, like after 5, you can have that little bit more time to like hang out and chill and all of that.
Yeah, that's such a super important thing. Like I always love whenever new people come into the office and they see people that they're friends with that they didn't know that they come into us. And then really like the people who are in the, like in our, we call it like the living room, but people who are in the living room and their kids are playing with the toys, they give them the whole rundown of the office and what they're about to experience with you in the consult and in the exam and in their care. And they basically do all the work for you. And so you're like, yeah, so, and they're like, oh yeah, so-and-so, they just told me about this and they just told me about that. And this is where you keep this and all of those things. And that's really cool. But it really just takes such a team effort, like from you, your team. And one of the things that Zach and I really wanted to touch on with you guys is being the husband-wife partner team. Like my wife, Dr. Caitlin, is about to start working in our office. Today is January 30th. So February 9th is her first day coming into my office. And so talk a little bit about like the dynamic of like the husband-wife duo. Like where do you guys like set up your roles? How do you guys collaborate with each other and those things?
Yeah, I will say, and we knew that going into, it's not easy, right? Like marriage isn't easy, it's work, and it should be if you want to have a good marriage that's going to last forever, right? And we made it an absolute rule before we ever even opened the office was no matter what's going on outside of the door, when we cross the front door into the practice, everything stops. Like we leave everything at the door, no matter what's happening in our personal life at that moment, because when we enter our office, it's not about us anymore. It's about the people that we're serving and the impact we're going to make in our community going forward.
And on that really quick, it is something to like, once you start building team, like to make sure accountability is that same throughout your entire team. There's been times where Colton and I have been literally at each other in the car. We walk in at 8:30 and we're like, what's up, y'all? And like straight to the office because we're like, F you to each other. And when the girls are coming and be like, everything all good? I'm like, no, actually it's not, you know, just give us like 2 minutes and then we're going to be ready to rock. And so it's like, sometimes that is like that. And you just have to remember like setting the boundaries, but having accountability. It's the same thing for our girls. Like if they come in, because we're all family, right? As much as it's like, oh, well, they're your employees. At the end of the day, you become friends, you become like your family members. You get to know these hopefully the whole life. And it's like, you want to have that same, like, hey, we need to do a check-in to see, like, is everything okay with you? Is there anything that we can do for you? Same thing with them. Like one of our girls walk in, I'm always like, vibe check. And then the girls are like, all right, vibe check. Let me go downstairs. Let me blow off some energy and then come in. Cause they may be dealing with shit too. And so it's like that same standard has to be held all the way throughout. It is funny though, because when we first opened, I feel like almost every spouse, like couple in chiropractic was like, do not open up an office together. I give you 5 years and you'll be, you know, out of it. And it really, like, at the end of the day, as long as you leave that shit at the door, it's not bad at all. It is really like exciting. And we collab so much on, especially our new patients. We have like a team effort too. So not like certain patients aren't just mine or his. It's literally you see who you see. And so that's what we've always wanted to instill in our practice, which is a little bit different. And obviously there's going to be like, oh, a little kid's like, oh, I want Dr. Lacey or I want Dr. Colton. It's like, okay, you're going with the flow. But for the most part, like we collab on literally everything. And that is really important too, because it's not just like your eyes or your hands on a person. You have different perspectives in the journey of healing.
Yeah. And I will say starting a practice, even if it's like, if it's 2 people in general, you don't even have to be husband and wife, but you better have, for the office vision, it better be the same between both of you. Like going in, you better be going in the same direction. Now you could specialize in different things, right? Like we do play to our strengths. Like if a postpartum mom is coming in and she's having a lot of postpartum issues, Lacey probably going to take that first patient, that new patient exam, right? And that consult. But if CrossFit dad comes in with 2 boys that are in baseball, I'll probably take that one too. So play to your strengths, but know you can't come in like husbands wanting to do like sports med stuff, and then wife wants to see like babies and moms only, and you have two different visions for a business, right? Business vision needs to go in the same direction, but you guys can specialize and do your things and play to your strengths within the business itself.
Right.
And from a business strategy or y'all's strengths, like what are some things that y'all both cover each other really well on, since you're both basically the CEOs of the same company and the same business? What are some things that, like, Colton, what are some of your strengths, and then Lacey, what are some of your strengths, and how they mix together to create, Free Spirit?
Yeah, so I'm pretty expressive. I mean, Colton and I's personalities are very similar, so it can be really great, but it can also be really hard too. We're both like dreamers. Colton is a little bit more of a dreamer of like, I'm floating out here, and I'm like, no, let's get shit done and do this. So I have to like reel him back in. But I think that is a strength too, of like seeing each other's differences, but seeing each other's similarities and playing to that strength. I'm also the person that, like, I don't know, Colton's always like, I don't ever get those messages, but patients will message me at 2 a.m. like with 25 questions, or I'm on vacation or whatever. And it's like, I take that time to like really be intentional with them. And Colton is obviously intentional, but in a different way.
I'll shut that shit down so fast.
He's like, no, so it's like, we know, okay, if someone's having a hard time, like they're going to come to me because they need that little bit more of like, I hate to say like more feminine energy at the point. But it's all about feminine and masculine energy, right? And like balancing that out. You can't be too feminine or too masculine. You have to be able to flow into either one. And that goes with everything: communication, the way that you adjust, and the way that you even serve your team as a CEO or a leader, even in your community too. And it's like really figuring that out at first, because it can pivot too. Like there's certain strengths that I'm like, you know what, I actually don't think that's my strength anymore. Like I've adapted and I've changed, or vice versa. So yeah, it's just figuring it out.
And then touching in with each other constantly really is knowing like what your goals are and where you want to go, and then constant communication across your whole team, not just you two. Like everyone has to be talking to each other about what's going on. So make sure you're having your like pre-shift huddles and everything, and then have your weekly meetings, quarterly meetings, yearly meetings, like vision casting stuff. So everybody's on board, and they know where we're going, and they know what tasks need to be done and by what time as well.
And I think you hinted at, and something I'm always curious of, because I personally struggle like with vacation time. Like I'm the person, like my fiance is very much like, okay, you can take a Friday off every once in a while. But one thing y'all, I mean, just from social media, it seems like y'all love to vacation. You're very good at vacationing. How is that communication one in the office? Like, hey, we're going to be gone for 7 days, 10 days. And how does that work in the office, first off?
Yeah, I will say going in, I think that's something that also might have set us apart a little bit, especially that first year. Like we made almost $500,000 our first year, and we took over 60 days off in the office. So like we closed over 2 months.
Yeah.
So, and we've done that every year since. Like we love to go and explore and experience life, because I feel like that's why we were set here in the first place, right? To experience and try to make what we have even bigger and experience even more and more, and do that for our family. But a way, I mean, it's not, you just do it. You shut it down. But so it's not kind of the systems behind that is you let your practice members know in advance, right? So one thing we do as a team that really helps with this actually is we try to plan starting in December or November, whatever it is, before 2024, we plan the entire year in our office. Like, what's our huge events we're going to do? What are some like internal things we're going to do? Like, how are we going to love on our people more? What are our big goals when it comes to stats and all those things? And then even our big vacations, like we're shutting down this week. We're shutting down 2 weeks for Christmas this year and New Year's and those kind of things. That way we know what's coming up ahead. And a month before, if we're shutting down 2 weeks for Christmas, like we did this year, our practice members know that in advance. So our girls are letting them know a month ahead, like, hey, we're going to be shut down for 2 weeks. Let's go ahead and get those scheduled appointments that you have as reschedules, or we'll hit them before we leave. We'll double up whatever we need to do. That way you're not just like blindsiding them. Oh, we're closed this Friday.
Yeah. And that's like, that's for us, it's the love language is like traveling and like seeing the world and experiencing different experiences. it's funny because we like with our coaching group that we're with, there's so many chiropractors that have been in practice for 20 plus years and hardly take a day off. They just take holidays, like the day of the holiday. And that is something that Colton and I, from the very beginning, even when we were in school, we were like, we want to be able to create the freedom in the practice that we want, but also the freedom in our life to be able to up and go and experience all of what life has to offer. And so too, it's like when you set that tone from the very beginning, even if you're 20 years in practice and you're like, okay, I need to pivot this year, I need to travel more, doing all of that, like setting the foundation with your team. Like Colton was saying, we always plan it out. But two, once it comes up, like your practice members are excited for you. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited about your team. Or when you come back, like you're fucking refreshed. So then it's like, okay, like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to see you. Oh yeah, like never leave. We were joking because the 2 weeks that we were closed, people were like, never leave again. Like we were dying without you. We realized like how beneficial chiropractic is for our life. And that right there, I think is the special sauce, because it makes them realize, oh, I'm showing up every week. And whenever I go a week or 2 weeks, even without getting adjusted, I feel so different. And that used to be my normal. And they realize like, I don't ever want to go back there. And that is how you create those long-term, those lifers in your practice.
Yeah, we started seeing a lot of that because I closed for like 10 days or something like that for Christmas. And everybody is saying that too. They're like, wow, like I remember like this is my norm. And like, that's not cool. So like you can't take a vacation again. And then I tell them like, oh, well, we're closing for 14 days because Caitlin and I are getting married and we're taking a week-long vacation. And now everybody is saying like, oh, are you so excited for your honeymoon? Are you so excited for your time off? Like, it's just nice to hear people be like, you deserve it. Like you work so hard. And then like when you think you're like, oh, I really don't work that much. Like we're open 26 hours a week and people are like, you're always here. You're never not available when I need you. You always are there for me. You're always there for me. And I'm like, I kind of live my life, And so you can really find that balance and like really give that. So that's pretty awesome to hear that, translates farther.
Yeah. And I would say when you're doing that vision, like if you're a startup or a student right now and you're doing that vision of what you want your office experience to be, you should do that for yourself too. Like who are the people you want to take care of that are going to fill your cup? Because if you're going in, you're like, I'm babies all day, but you go into like a PI clinic or a geriatric clinic, that's probably going to drain you, right?
Yeah.
But then also like, how much do you want to work? How much do you want to be there? We're open 21 adjusting hours during the week and we see almost 800 people, right? So it's hot and heavy, but we have enough time to refill our cup as well. And they know like, if we're shutting down for 2 weeks, we're shutting down for 2 weeks going forward. So you create that experience before you ever even open the door.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. And I've been reading 10x is easier than 2x. And it's a lot of like, I'm reading it and kind of getting ready for this podcast. I was like, I feel like this is kind of their jam. And they talk about like the 180 days off that you're supposed to take. And I'm like, that's half a year. That's a lot. But it's really, really cool to hear y'all, talk about taking 2 full months off and you're still thriving as a practice. And it's really inspiring, one. And it's also planting a different seed for my vision, I know. And I hope our listeners as well.
Yeah, I just started reading that book as well. And in the intro, he talked about Michelangelo like carving the David sculpture. And he said, I just took away everything that wasn't David. So that's kind of my big takeaway from you guys today is like, take away everything that's not in your vision, right? Do less. Like you don't have to take all these things. Like, we talk to people with startups and they're like, well, I just need to get so many people in the door. It's like, well, why don't you focus on taking care of the 3 people you have this month instead of trying to get 90 in, all right. And those 3 people, those turn into 6, those 6 turn into 12. That's how you multiply your business, by taking care of the people who are there. So by taking care of like yourself and all those things, what's, as we kind of close up, what's next for Free Spirit? What's next for Colton and Lacey? And what can we be expecting to see you guys do in the next couple of years?
It's
this year's about to be all at one time, we feel. So
vision is definitely growing.
Yeah. So it's funny because a few years ago, Colton and I were vision casting, right? And he was like, when we went through the zoning, obviously I was very heavy-handed in that. And I was like, this will be our forever place. And Colton's like, it's gonna be like our 5-year place. And I did not want to accept that. And I also didn't want to accept like we will always be a family practice where it's just Colton and I. And we set a number. And we were like, once we hit this will be like the perfect for us. And we won't ever grow. We won't even take new patients. And then we surpassed that. And we're like, this is easy, like this is fun. And then it was like, okay, maybe, especially once I became a mom and Colton, obviously a dad, we were like, okay, let's pivot our vision. Like now we want to 10x our vision, but also we want to create even more freedom in our personal lives for our kids. And so, last year, Colton jokes always because he's like, I'm glad you're finally seeing the vision. I was like, all right, maybe we should hire a doctor. And then it was like, oh, when the opportunity of 2 came, we were like, well, let's do it. Why not? But at the same time, a new building space, very large building space on a large lot of land, is potentially in the works. And so we realized like, hey, we're running out of space. We don't have any parking anymore. It is becoming more of a hassle for us too. And so it's just like, you want to create, especially the more that you grow, like you want to create that same culture and that same community, like we talked about all through this call. But really, it's like, how can you 10x that vision? How can you actually become that 3-star? You can't do it alone. You have to do it together. And so there's a lot of big things in the works. 2024 is going to be a great one.
Yeah. Those are like the immediate. And then I'm still trying to work on her getting to the vision of opening another Spears hospital one day with 1,000 beds in it, chiropractic or something. But we'll get there one day. That one's way down the road.
Yeah.
We talk about, we're like, man, can you imagine like all of these practices, right, that are just opening up and they're doing good, but like, could you imagine like a huge collaboration where you have all these different types of chiropractors that are all, the intention is behind one thing, and how that impact looks like? That is amazing.
And I try to challenge myself often of trying to think outside the box of what I know as being a chiropractor, being involved in the chiropractic bubble for so long, like what is actually truly possible. And every time I do that, I always have to go backwards. Unfortunately, we play at such a low level now, and the bar is set so low. The chiropractors of the past kicked our ass when it comes to impact. Like I said, the Spears Hospital, 600-bed hospital, they were taking polio kids that were coming in on crutches, and they were walking out without those crutches, right? So one of my big goals in chiropractic is to bring that crap back. And maybe it's not like a giant, I would never call it a hospital, but like a giant community center or something. But maybe it is just all these different chiropractors actually thinking at a really high level again and serving our purpose as chiropractic as a profession at the level it should be served at going forward.
Yeah. And I'm right there with you, Colton. We had Tony Ebel on back in June or July of last year, and we were talking about recreating, again, not to call it a hospital, but one of those just big old building, 20, 30, 50 chiropractors serving it up, and really bringing back chiropractic to the forefront. And so,
like the Gonstead clinic, dude, had an airport, like, bro.
Yeah,
that's always
right?
I'm like, what?
Right? Had to build a hospital because they had so many, or not a hospital, a hotel, because so many people were coming in.
Yeah, Thurman Fleet was seeing like 600 a day by himself, and he had the police like shut the streets down in San Antonio and was like directing traffic to get people in and stuff. And we think that our 100 a week is good, or 300 a week is like, oh, I made it. So we have to open our minds really big. But Zach, I think that about does it for me. I think I'm pretty good right here. Colton, Lacey, you have anything for the good of the order?
Do you guys have anything else?
That's it for us too. Let's dream bigger, do bigger. We need it. The world needs it.
Awesome. Let everybody know where they can find you guys and how they can get connected with you before we sign off.
Social media at Free Spirit Chiropractic is our office. I'm at Free Spirit Chiro.
I'm at Dr. Colton Nevel.
You can also find us at the Startup Lab. We teach startups how to really, whether you're in school or you've been in practice for 5 years, level up your practice in all areas, not only just in your space, but in your personal lives as well. And then we also have a social program, Free Spirit Social Chiro, that launches every single month, and all the great content that you see on our page.
Awesome.
Love it.
Yep. Colton, Lacey, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks
for having us.
Sounds good. Peace. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the What Now podcast. If you took something valuable away, feel free to share it with a friend, post it on your socials, or give us a 5-star review. We'll see y'all next time. Peace.